Hi guys, and welcome to another 7-minute lecture. I wanted to run you through a thought experiment that's often used in human rights courses, ethics courses, and war studies courses all over the world. This scenario varies from lecturer to lecturer, but I think it's a useful hypothesis to discuss an extremely important issue: torture. Should we be allowed to do it? If so, what exactly are the circumstances under which we can embark on that? This experiment I'm referring to is something called the ticking time bomb scenario. It was originally created by the great British philosopher Jeremy Bentham. As I just said, the exact scenario varies from lecturer to lecturer. So here's the version I use with my students. There's a time bomb that's about to go off in about 6 hours. About 1,000 people are likely to die from the blast. We have a guy in our custody, and there's about a 50% chance that he knows where the bomb is. Let me repeat. There's a time bomb that's about to go off in 6 hours. About 1,000 people are likely to die from this blast. We have someone in our custody, and there's a 50% chance that the guy knows where the bomb is. You are the leader of the country, and it's now your decision. Do you torture the guy in order to do our best to extract the location, or do you say torture cannot be sanctioned in such a scenario? So there are obviously many facets to this. Let's explore them. You would notice that I've set a time limit of 6 hours. This is because some people say, oh, you know what, we need to find other ways to trace the bomb. We can use a bomb squad, we can use canines, we can use search missions, we can mobilize a lot of manpower to sweep the entire country to find this bomb. Some might even say we need to persuade the guy or brainwash him, if that's what it takes, to convince him to join our side. Having a time limit of 6 hours clearly makes that a much harder range of options. If we had days and weeks to find the bomb, then perhaps we could look for other options. But considering the limited time, can softer methods like that work? So keep that in mind. You would also notice that I said the guy only has a 50% chance of knowing where the bomb is. This is clearly intended to make things harder for you as well, because the possibility of us torturing the right person is split right down the middle. Would you go ahead and torture him knowing that it's only a 50% chance? I always get interesting answers on this front, which is why I kind of inserted this in there. Because I have some students who say, look, the percentage is immaterial, considering that 1,000 people might die. Even if there's a 10% chance or a 5% chance, I would still torture the guy because 1,000 lives are at stake. At the same time, I also have students who say 50% is far too low. It would have to be 90, maybe even 100% before we can sanction something like torture. So ask yourself where you stand. Is the certainty of the suspect a game changer for you? Do you feel that even a small chance to save those 1,000 lives is worth the risk of torturing an innocent man? Or do you feel that the risk of torturing the wrong guy is far too high for you to green light such a thing? There are some people who say torture simply doesn't work, so that's something we need to consider as well. If you physically and mentally harm someone with the intent to extract some kind of information, then they would just tell you what they think you want to hear from them in order for the abuse to stop. This is a valid point, and there are experts, even the FBI and CIA, who make this argument. However, there seem to be an equal number of experts, also from some of these institutions, who seem to testify that torture does indeed work. You would also have to consider what method ought to be used in an emergency like this. There are some methods of torture, softer methods like sleep deprivation or letting water drip on a person's skull, that are commonly used forms of torture around the world, but they take a long time to work. We only have 6 hours here to find the bomb. So depriving him of sleep for 6 hours isn't really going to work. We're probably going to have to resort to some kind of physical or stronger mental coercion. So what would that be? The most common type that Western discourse seems to talk about these days is waterboarding, a practice where the suspect is suffocated through systematic drowning. The major advantage here is that it doesn't leave marks on the body and there isn't any permanent mutilation. So many have stated that sort of this is ideal, especially for Western nations that are worried about human rights. But some say that it is a form of brutal torture and that it is something that needs to be banned. The late great Christopher Hitchens volunteered himself for waterboarding in order to write about the experience for a magazine called Vanity Fair. And he basically said, look, if this isn't torture, I don't know what is. And he also said that it's a myth after undergoing it, that waterboarding creates the sensation of drowning. He said that's not true. You are in fact being drowned for real. It just happens to be a controlled drowning rather than a random one. So perhaps that's a method to be used in the ticking time bomb scenario, or perhaps not, depending on where you stand. Overall, the point of this experiment is for you to treat it as a moral puzzle, as an issue of ethics. I often throw this out to my students, and I always get a bunch of them who think they are smarter than they actually are, and they try to look for all kinds of loopholes out of it. They say, oh, how do we know that torture would work on this particular guy? Or how do we know that even if we find out where the bomb is, we would get to it on time? And just supposedly practical considerations like that. But the point of this is obviously to give us some kind of tangible scenario to test the limits of what we consider to be ethical, not to play a lawyer and find loopholes around it. Because let's face it, this will always be a hypothetical scenario. There will never be a scenario where this plays out in such a neat, exact form. Real life is far more complicated than simple black and white scenarios like this, as we all know. So we are much better off treating it for what it is and trying to grapple with it using our own moral compass instead of trying to find a supposedly smart way out. So tell me where you guys stand in this issue. Would you torture the guy in the hopes that 1,000 lives can be saved? Do you think 50% is enough certainty for you to sanction torture, or would you require far more? Because ultimately, there is no right or wrong answer in a scenario like this. It all comes down to where you choose to draw that magic line. If you like content like this, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Thank you, take care, and I'll see you soon.